Welcome to the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in critical times. Here's your host, Bill Kelly.
This is the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in these critical times. I'm your host, Bill Kelly. Good to have you with us today. And in case I've missed you, Happy New Year as we roll into 2025. And as we mentioned on our previous show, it's going to be a very fascinating year politically here in this country. With the federal election coming up, we don't even know who the leader of the Liberal Party is going to be at this stage, but that's to be determined. Probably an election here in Ontario. I think we pretty much know that Doug Ford's going to get reelected there. But there are some other issues, and many of them circling around the incoming president of the United States, that being Donald Trump, of course. And we've already had one dose of Trump, of course, a number of years ago, the Trump administration. And let's just put it this way. It was taxing for the Canadian government to try to deal with this guy, and probably even more so during the second Trump administration. And a number of things are going to come up. And, of course, you know, Trump spouting off, as he usually does, about a number of different things, usually with no foundation for that or basis in fact. The latest one was him musing just the other day about Canada joining the United States and becoming the 51st state. Now, those are pretty harsh words, of course, but not new. It's not a new concept. This was after he had his meeting with Justin Trudeau down at Mar-a-Lago a few weeks ago. And he suggested that he said it half mockingly, but also suggesting that, well, maybe there's something to that, too. And, of course, Trump has taken it even further, suggesting that if Canada does become the 51st United States, that Wayne Gretzky should be the first governor of that state. Wayne, if you may not know, is a neighbor of Trump down at Mar-a-Lago. The Gretzkys have residences down there, and I guess they hang out at Mar-a-Lago. He was there for inauguration or for the victory on election night, and he's been there since then, too. So Gretzky and Donald Trump are buds. And I will not be one to judge Wayne Gretzky's character based on who he hangs out with, but just remember, Wayne, that you are certainly judged by the people you associate with. And some people may have a much different opinion of you now, knowing that you're in the fold there. But anyway, be that as it might, Gretzky is Gretzky, and Trump is Trump. And Trump is always going to shoot his mouth off about a number of things like this. And what it did initially here is it forced a number of Canadian politicians to weigh in on this, and I don't think anybody really wanted to. A number of ministers saying, well, no, we really don't want to do that. And what this did, it kind of gave the story wind under the wings. And I don't think it's a story. I really don't. I don't think there's anything going on here. There are some people, though, that want to try to make something of this. I guess from Trump's standpoint, it's probably not a bad idea to start focusing on something like this instead of the fact that a lot of the stuff he campaigned on and the promises he'd made about lowering grocery prices, etc., he's pretty much admitted during some interviews on Fox News that, well, he can't really do that. So let's just change the channel and see if people start focusing on this. But the latest one to weigh in on this is Kevin O'Leary. Now, we know Kevin O'Leary on this side of the border, of course. He has been on financial news shows and television shows for a number of years on this side of the border. He was one of the first dragons on Dragon's Den. He went down to the States, of course, and became part of that show with Shark Tank. So he's got a persona down in the United States, most certainly. And he has weighed in on this. Kevin O'Leary now says that, yeah, it might have started off as a joke, but there's some legitimate reasons why we should follow up on this. And he has even volunteered to be the liaison here, that he'll meet with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, he says, and try to talk about negotiating some sort of a platform or a deal for something like this to happen. Well, first of all, Kevin, nobody asked you to get involved in this. I mean, you're a citizen. I'm not sure which country you are, but I mean, I know where your affiliation and your loyalties are. But you're not involved in this in any way, shape, or form. You're entitled to your opinion, but you shouldn't be sticking your nose into business, which is really between government officials. So neither the Canadian nor the U.S. Governments have asked for Kevin O'Leary's help, and I don't think that's going to happen. So don't hold your breath for that, Kevin. But he did weigh in on this, and of course he was on Fox News, which is always a great platform for the Trumpites and others to talk about these sorts of things. But O'Leary started with something that I guess we've talked about a number of times, is misinformation or fake news, or whatever label you want to put on this, suggesting that about half of Canadians were really interested in following up on this idea. Well, that's not true. It's simply not true. I don't know what circles he hangs out in, but there have been surveys done on this. An Angus Reid survey that was released just about a month ago, as a matter of fact, found that only 6% of Canadians felt that Canada should join the United States. There was another poll, Leger poll that was done up here too, that Fox News referenced, that said 13% of Canadians would like to join the United States, which means, of course, by that extrapolation, 82% say, no way. It's not an issue here. It's not something we want to look into. And I'm sure there are people on this side of the border that would love to join the United States. Because I see the Trump flags from time to time floating around different parts of Ontario here. And I know that there's a base there, a small one, but a very, active base that would love for this to happen. And it's not a new story. I mean, the idea of Canada being absorbed into the United States, and I think that's probably a better way of looking at it, as a matter of fact, has been going on, well, I guess since the early 1800s, culminating at that time, of course, in the War of 1812, when the Americans invaded. And, of course, they were driven back over the border, the Battle of Queenston Heights, just named Niagara Falls, for those of you not in the southern Ontario area, and ultimately led with the British troops actually going into Washington and burning down the White House. That pretty much put an end to that whole idea for the time being anyway. But there have been attempts in the past to do this. And Trump's musings and O'Leary kind of jumping on board is really just the latest incarnation of this. But I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about this or thinking about this, because it's just not going to happen. There's too much going on here. And yeah, there is an argument to be made for closer economic ties and military ties, because we do share common goals here. But we're already doing that. We already have trade agreements. We already just negotiated or renegotiated, I guess, in the last Trump administration, an updated NAFTA deal, North American Free Trade Agreement. And by the way, that's what this is supposed to be, is a trade agreement. The problem we have with Donald Trump, and we've seen this happen time and time again, Trump doesn't want to negotiate. He wants to conquer. He wants everything on his side of the table, doesn't seem to want to give anything away. And that's going to be problematic, I think, for the Canadian government and so many other governments when it comes to negotiations in the next couple of years, once he is sworn in just a couple of weeks. So that's something we have to keep in mind. But we already have NORAD. We already have a military agreement. We have NATO, of course. Both the United States and Canada are members of that. We have trade agreements, not just on the federal level, but between state and provincial governments. We have trade agreements. So we're already there. And if there is a discussion to be had about, well, let's look at these and maybe we can tweak this and tweak that, sure, that happens from time to time. But we don't need to go to the nth degree here and simply say, well, we'll join the United States, because notwithstanding what Donald Trump would characterize this as, it's not a good idea. Well, we'd be under the protection of the U.S. Army. We have that. We have a northern border here, and it's a scary proposition right now. And we're not trying to be dismissive of that. I mean, there's a lot of activity between Russian and Chinese troops in the Arctic right now, trying to claim an awful lot of those lands and that passageway as international waters, some would suggest as Russian waters. And that's something that's going to have to be dealt with by the U.S. and Canadian governments. And it's going to take an increased commitment from Canada to do that. But the fallback position does not need to be, well, we'll simply acquiesce and become part of the United States. I don't think Canadians want to see that. I certainly don't want to see that. And I think we really just need to look at what Trump is saying here and say, look, this is Donald Trump being Donald Trump. And there are times, of course, he's the president of the United States, and there's times when we have to pay attention to what he's saying. But there's other times when you simply dismiss it as the usual Trump rhetoric and bombast. And as for Kevin O'Leary, well, some suggesting that he's Donald Trump light on this side of the border. I mean, I just look at what's going on in our country right now and some real challenges, some of which may be addressed in the upcoming federal election. And we're going to hear an awful lot from the people that want to be prime minister or MPs once the federal vote is held. But what we don't need right now is another narcissistic reality show host like Kevin O'Leary telling us what to do and deciding on policy. The United States already went through that. Doesn't that remind you of the orange guy down in the White House right now? I mean, his basis, his foundation, his qualifications, as it were, for the job, were that he was on The Apprentice. And Kevin O'Leary's on Shark Tank and Dragon's Den. Big deal. It's theater. It's entertainment TV. This is the real world. And real world means interesting people, yes, but it has to have qualified people that can deal with some of these issues. We're in a very, very precarious position in Canada and globally because of what's going on with the Ukraine. And that may actually be on the front burner again very soon, maybe once Trump takes office. Putin's ideas of aggression into Eastern Europe once again. So many other things that are going on. We need some adults at the table not whimsical people that are just throwing stuff out there and hoping some of it sticks on the wall. It's serious times in this country, serious times right across the world, and we need serious people, intelligent people, making those decisions. So far, we haven't heard from very many of them. Here's hoping that that's going to come to pass and we're going to have a much better 2025. That's it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks so much for being with us. By the way, you can catch us anywhere on Substack, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell to pass it on. And if you're on Blue Sky, and I'm seeing more and more people joining Blue Sky right now, they're getting fed up with Elon Musk and X, and are moving over there. It's an interesting platform. You should check it out. And if you remember already, by all means, post it on there as well, and we'll spread the word on this. Always enjoy the podcast. Always enjoy the feedback we get from you when we do this. Until next time, I'm Bill Kelly. Stay in touch and stay informed. Brought to you by Wizen's Law, personal injury lawyers. Listen, you didn't choose to get injured, but you can choose the right lawyer. Wizen's Law, 905-522-1102 or wizenslaw.com.